reticulated polyfoam and faux fur for a trip back to 1982, to a strange, beautiful, slightly unsettling world of puppets, prophecy, and one very fragile crystal. I'm talking about the Dark Crystal. So here's the quick setup. The story takes place on the alien world of Thra, where the once harmonious crystal of truth has been shattered, splitting reality into two opposing races, the cruel, decaying Skeksis and the gentle, mystical Uru, also known as the Mystics. Our hero, Jen, is one of the last surviving Gelflings and is sent on a quest to restore the crystal before a rare celestial alignment locks the Skeksis into permanent power. Along the way, he teams up with Kira, another Gelfling who, surprise, wasn't supposed to exist. Together, they face giant crab monsters, prophetic riddles, and a whole lot of existential dread, all without a single human actor on screen. Now, when we talk about the lead actors here, it's a little different because the film is entirely performed through puppetry and voice work. The two names you absolutely have to know are Jim Henson and Frank Oz. Henson, of course, is the legendary creator of the Muppets and the mind behind shows like Sesame Street. He had already reshaped children's entertainment with warmth and humor. Oz, his longtime collaborator, is equally iconic. He performed characters like Miss Piggy, Fozzie Bear, and outside of Henson's world, Yoda in Star Wars. Together, they directed this film as a bold departure from their usual tone. Less comedy and more myth and honesty. A lot more nightmare fuel than parents probably expected. When the film first came out, the reception was mixed. Some critics admired the craftsmanship, but others found it too dark, too weird, and lacking the humor people expected from Henson. Audiences were also divided. Kids who went in expecting something like The Muppet Movie were instantly greeted with skeletal bird creatures draining life essence from helpless victims. That's a bit of a tonal whiplash. The film performed modestly at the box office, but it wasn't the runaway hit its creators might have hoped for. But here's where things get interesting. Over time, the Dark Crystal didn't fade away, it grew. Through home video, late-night TV airings, and word of mouth, it found a new audience. People who first saw it as a kid and were maybe slightly traumatized came back and, as adults, realized just how ambitious it was. Today, it's widely considered a cult classic, even a landmark in practical effects and storytelling. What once felt alienating now feels visionary, and part of that reevaluation comes down to its themes. At its core, this story is about balance. Light and dark, logic and emotion, self and other. Back in 1982, that might have come across as abstract or even a little preachy. But today's audiences tend to connect more deeply with that idea. The notion that opposing forces aren't meant to destroy each other, but be reconciled. That hits differently now, especially in a world that often feels divided into extremes. The film's message that wholeness comes from integration, not domination, feels surprisingly mature for something marketed to kids. There are also interpretations that people may have missed the first time around. As a child, you might see the Skeksis as just the bad guys. But watching it later, they feel more like exaggerated reflections of human flaws. Greed, vanity, fear of mortality, they're not just villains, they're what happens when a society loses its balance and empathy. And the Mystics, while peaceful, they're not exactly heroes either. They're passive to a fault. The film subtly suggests that neither extreme is ideal. That nuance is easy to overlook when you're focused on whether the giant beetle crab is going to eat someone. In terms of where this film fits in with Henson and Oz's careers, it's a fascinating outlier. Jim Henson had built his reputation on accessibility and humor, but here, he was pushing into darker, more experimental territory. This wasn't just a kids' movie, it was a full-blown fantasy epic with its own language, mythology, and rules. It paved the way for later projects like Labyrinth, which blended that same sense of wonder with a bit more humor and star power. For Frank Oz, it showed his range beyond puppeteering into directing complex, atmospheric stories, something he'd continue with films like Little Shop of Horrors. Stylistically, you can see recurring traits in Henson's work even here. An emphasis on handcrafted artistry, expressive characters, and a belief that fantasy can carry emotional truth. The world building is dense, almost uncompromising. There's no wink to the audience, no easy entry point. It trusts you to figure things out, which is both its greatest strength and also its biggest risk. And yes, this film absolutely influenced other creators. You can see its DNA in later films and series that rely heavily on practical effects and immersive world building. Directors like Guillermo del Toro have openly celebrated this kind of tactile storytelling, where creatures feel like they exist in real space, not just on a computer screen. Even in today's CGI-heavy landscape, there's a renewed appreciation for the kind of craftsmanship this film represents. And in fact, in 2019, Netflix released a prequel series, The Dark Crystal: Age of Resistance. So let's talk about some of this iconic imagery, because this movie is packed with it. The Skeksis, with their decaying robes and vulture-like faces, are unforgettable. The moment when they drain essence is still haunting. The towering crystal chamber, glowing and ominous, feels like something out of a dream, or a fever dream. And then there's the Great Conjunction itself, this cosmic event that ties the whole story together. These images may not have become quoted, per se, in the same way a famous line of dialogue, but visually, they've stuck with people for decades. And watching it now, years later, the film feels different. Slower, yes, but also more deliberate. In an age of rapid cuts and constant exposition, there's something refreshing about how much this movie lets you sit in its world. It doesn't rush to explain itself. It doesn't hold your hand. That can be challenging, especially if you're used to more modern pacing, but it also makes the experience more immersive. You're not just watching the story, you're kind of wandering through it. There's also a certain sincerity that stands out today. This is a film that fully commits to its vision. No matter how strange or risky, it doesn't try to be trendy or ironic. It just is what it is. A dark, beautiful fairy tale told through an incredible amount of craftsmanship and imagination. And maybe that's why it's lasted. Because underneath the weird creatures and the alien landscapes, there's something very human about it. A story about healing what's broken, about understanding that light and dark are both part of the same thing, the same whole. And that's the kind of idea that doesn't really go out of style. So if you haven't revisited The Dark Crystal in a while, it might be worth another look. Just maybe not right before bed. Those Skeksis still have a way of sticking with you. So what was your very first reaction the first time you saw The Dark Crystal? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe to join me for more trips back to the video stores of old.